The Tempest. Act 2, Scene 1, lines 124 to 180. Let us listen to the text being read out aloud.
You were kneeled to and importuned otherwise by all of us, and the fair soul herself, weighed between loathness and obedience, at which end of the beam should bow. We have lost your son. I fear for ever. Milan and Naples have more widows in them of this business making than we bring men to comfort them. The fault's your own.
So is the dearest of the loss.
My Lord Sebastian, the truth you speak doth lack some gentleness, and time to speak it in. You rub the sore when you should bring the plaster.
Very well.
And most originally.
It is foul weather in us all, good sir, when you are cloudy.
Foul weather?
Very foul.
Had I plantation of this isle, my lord,
He'd sow it with nettle seed.
Or ducks, or mallows?
and were the king on it, what would I do?
Escape being drunk for want of wine?
In the commonwealth I would, by contraries, execute all things, for no kind of traffic would I admit, no name of magistrate, letters should not be known, riches, poverty, and use of service none, contract, succession, born, bound of land, tilth, vineyard, none. No use of metal, corn, or wine, or oil, no occupation, all men idle, all, and women too, but innocent and pure. No sovereignty,
Yet he would be king on it.
The latter end of his commonwealth forgets the beginning.
all things in common nature should produce without sweat or endeavor. Treason, felony, sword, pike, knife, gun, or need of any engine would I not have. But nature should bring forth of its own kind all foison, all abundance, to feed my innocent people.
No marrying among his subjects?
None, man. All idle. Whores and knaves.
I would with such perfection govern, sir, to excel the golden age.
Save his majesty.
Long live Gonzalo!
And do you mark me, sir?
Prithee no more, thou dost talk nothing to me.
I do well believe your highness, and did it to minister occasion to these gentlemen, who are of such sensible and nimble lungs that they always used to laugh at nothing.
'Twas you we laughed at.
Who, in this kind of merry fooling, am nothing to you. So you may continue and laugh at nothing still.
What a blow was there given.
And it had not fallen flat long.
You are gentlemen of brave mettle. You would lift the moon out of her sphere, if she would continue in it 5 weeks without changing.
Enter Ariel, invisible, playing solemn music.
Let us now look at this text in detail. In the last class, we had Sebastian accusing the king of doing wrong. First of all, he got his daughter married to an African, and therefore they had to make this journey and experience this storm, and that so many people had to die. Now, in this class, he continues that accusation, and he says, you were kneeled to and importuned otherwise. Kneeled to and importuned means begged by all of us, and the fair soul herself weighed between loathness and obedience, at which end of the beam should bow. He says, all of us kneeled down in front of you and begged you not to do this. And the beautiful girl was caught between disgust and disobedience or obedience to you. We have lost your son, I fear forever. Milan and Naples have more widows in them of this business's making than we bring men to comfort them. The fault's your own, he says to the king, his own brother. Now we've lost your son forever too, I fear. This marriage and subsequent shipwreck has created more widows in Milan and Naples than we have survivors to bring home to comfort them. All of this is your fault. And Alonso says, so is the dearest of the loss. He says, the heaviest loss is mine, he says. Now Gonzalo here, being the person he is, tries to pacify things. And he tells Sebastian, my Lord Sebastian, the truth you speak doth lack some gentleness, and time to speak it in. You rub the sore when you should bring the plaster. My Lord Sebastian, despite the truth in your words, what you've said is unkind and inappropriate. You're rubbing salt to his wound rather than putting balm on it. Sebastian says, very well, Antonio, and most chirurgianly, he says, like a good surgeon. Gonzalo tells Alonso, it is foul weather in us all, good sir, when you are cloudy. He says, noble sir, we all feel under the weather when you are feeling gloomy. Foul weather? Very foul. Had I plantation of this isle, my lord? Now there are different strings of conversations here. Gonzalo is on his own trajectory, whereas whenever he speaks, Sebastian and Antonio have to butt in. And this is not a positive rebuttal, but it is very negative, highly ridiculing in nature. He'd sowed, and so when he says, if I had plantation on this island, Antonio butts in and he says, he'd sowed with nettle seed. And he says, he will grow useless stinging nettle all over it. Or docks or mallows. Docks and mallows are some other weeds. So Sebastian has to be negative. Gonzalo continues, of course, and he says, and were the king on it. That means he's continuing his earlier thought. He says, if I were a king on this, if I had this island for myself, and if I were a king on it, what would I do? Escape being drunk for want of wine. Sebastian interrupts, saying he wouldn't get drunk because there isn't any wine. And Gonzalo says, in the Commonwealth, I would by contraries execute all things. For no kind of traffic would I admit, no name of magistrate. He says, in my Commonwealth, I would do everything in a very opposite way of normal. I wouldn't allow any business. Traffic is business. There would be no judges, judges. Letters should not be known, riches, poverty, and use of service, none. Contract, succession, born, bound of land, tilt, vineyard, none. He says there would be no school. Letters is school here, letters. There would be no school or learning, no riches, poverty, or servants, none of that. No contracts, inheritance, privately owned land, farming, or vineyards, none of that. I wouldn't have any of these in my kingdom, he says. No use of metal, corn, or wine, or oil, no occupation. All men idle, all and women too, but innocent and pure, no sovereignty. He said there would be no metal work, no grinding of corn, no wine making, or making of olive oil. There'd be no work, men would be doing nothing. And women too, he says, except those things that are innocent and pure. There'd be no kingship. And in between Gonzalo's sentence, Sebastian says to Antonio, he says, yet he would be king on it, though he'd be the king of this land with no kingship. The latter end of his commonwealth forgets the beginning. His colony is ending up a long way from where it began, because Gonzalo had started, if I were a king of this island. Now he says there won't be any kingship. Gonzalo continues, all things in common nature should produce without sweat or endeavor. Treason, felony, sword, pike, knife, gun, or need of any engine would I not have. But nature should bring forth of its own kind, all foison, all abundance, to feed my innocent people. He says nature would produce everything people need on this island. There'd be no treason, crime, sword, spear, knife, gun, or need of any other weapon. Without any human help, nature would grow bountiful of harvest and feed my innocent people. No marrying among his subjects, Sebastian says. None man, no idle, all idle, wars and names. No marriage, all will be prostitutes and scoundrels. So these two people are speaking in isolation among themselves. But this man is on his own trip. He talks about his own island, and if he were to rule that island, I would with such perfection govern, sir, to excel the golden age. My perfection will be such, it would excel the golden age itself. Sebastian and Antonio very sarcastically say, God save His Majesty! Long live Gonzalo! But Gonzalo is talking to the king and he says, and do you mark me, sir? Are you listening to me, sir? But Alonso is tired and he says, prithee no more, thou dost talk nothing to me. Please say no more, because whatever you say means nothing to me. And Gonzalo agrees with him and he says, I do well believe, your highness, and did it to minister occasion to these gentlemen who are of such sensible and nimble lungs that they always used to laugh at nothing. I agree with you completely, your highness. I said these things to give these gentlemen a good time, since they have such strong lungs that they so often used to laugh at meaningless trivialities. 'Twas you we laughed at, Antonio says. We were laughing at you. Gonzalo says, who in this kind of merry fooling I'm nothing to you, so you may continue and laugh at nothing still. But in all of your silly little jokes, you see me as nothing. So go on, laugh at nothing. What a blow was there given. Says, what an insult he just made. It had not fallen flat long. Too bad it fell so flat, Sebastian says. Gonzalo, you are gentlemen of brave metal. You would lift the moon out of her sphere if she would continue in it 5 weeks without changing. He says, you are such cunning pun on this word, okay? You're such cunning men that you would even steal the moon if it were to continue in the same orbit for 5 more weeks. And at that point enters Ariel, invisible, playing some solemn music. To summarize, Gonzalo tries to calm and comfort people around him, especially the king. On the other hand, Sebastian and Antonio ridicule and even condemn people around them. Thank you.